Okay, it's 10:01. We have participants from over 27 different HOAs in CD5. So we're going to start. Here comes Michael Stokes from Carthay. Okay. And I will try and watch if we have more admits, but you know me, I like to start on time. So that's just the way it goes. I'm going to mute everybody. And then I will unmute as we need to. So first of all, I want to say Happy New Year to everybody. I'm so excited that we have so many people joining us from all parts of the district. I want to first recognize I want to remind everyone that we're recording, and if you don't want to be recorded, then you should jump off the meeting. I want to also say Rocky Delgadillo is on the Zoom somewhere. I don't see him on my, there he is. Hello, Rocky. I'm going to unmute you, Rocky, if I know how to do that. Can you unmute yourself?
No, you can't. You have to.
I have to do it.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Thank you. Okay, I want to say thank you very much for all the work that you did on redistricting. You did an amazing, amazing job. I was, as this group knows, at a meeting, I was not immediately impressed that you were going to be our rep. But at the end of the day, you turned me around and you did a great job. So I have a certificate here. You're the first one to ever receive a certificate. Sorry.
Thank you.
This is what the certificate looks like.
Very nice.
Okay.
Oh, very nice.
And
Thank you.
it says, from the Coalition of Homeowner Associations, Council District 5 is pleased to recognize Rocky Delgadillo for his contributions, efforts, intelligence, and impact during the redistricting process for the city of Los Angeles. And then there's a seal, a gold seal here, and it says, "You make a difference."
Oh, that's so nice of you. That's very nice.
You really did make a difference. And I was delighted to work with you on the redistricting process. And I wanted to just say on behalf of the coalition, thank you very much.
Well,
and
thank you.
I'll get this to you.
Okay.
Okay.
No worries. No worries. Okay. I did want to just say though, that the true hero were all of you guys who used to not back down, make sure your voices were heard, and you did. And I was very, very excited about that. And really all I did was listen. So you guys were terrific, and I thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all you do in the communities. This is really, as you know, Marsha, this is a tough thing for you guys to do. You dedicate a lot of time. It's not a small thing. And I see a lot of familiar faces out there, Diane, Arturo, all you know, Terry, all of you guys who helped me push it across the line. And I just want to thank you, Marsha, all of you who were a big participant in this, and I'm honored to have had a chance to work with you, and hopefully it won't be the last time. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rocky. And just have a healthy and happy new year. Okay. Okay, bye-bye. I need to resend somebody a Zoom invite. Terry, can you send Mike Eveloff a Zoom invite? Do you have it on the email?
Yes, I have it on another computer. I'll do it right now.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so let me move on here. Okay, so thank you to everybody who sent in questions. We have 57 questions pared down from over 70. I've divided the questions into 6 categories. Homelessness, number 1, 2, planning, development, and land use. 3, infrastructure. 4, city hall corruption. 5, public safety. And 6, other questions regarding constituent services. And time permitting, we'll take questions from the chat box. If you have a question, put it in the chat box. And here's how we're going to do this Zoom forum. I'll ask a question of the candidates and tell the candidates how much time they have to answer the question. Eduardo, my wonderful husband here, he's my timekeeper. And so you all remember when he used to park cars or direct the parking? Now he's my timekeeper. So thank you, dear. You'll be rewarded later. Okay, so when, let's see, here's how we're going to do it. Well, I'll ask a question, tell the candidates how much time they have. When they have 15 seconds left, I'll say 15. When their time is up, I'll say stop, and that's it. So answers should be succinct, organized, with no rambling. Mike Eveloff, if you can get on the Zoom, will co-moderate with me, and he will be doing affordable housing, infrastructure, and public safety. Okay, so let's get to it. What?
You have to unmute.
I know, and I'm going to unmute Katy. Can you unmute yourself, Katy? Talk to me.
Hi.
Okay, good. Okay, and Sam, you're unmuted. Okay. You take it. You take it. That's Mike. He can't. Tell him to Chippy's going to send him the email.
This is that's Terry Tippett was going to send it to you. Okay.
Terry, did you send the email to Mike? She sent it.
She's
Yes.
Okay.
I texted him too and said, did you get it? And I haven't heard back.
Okay, so he's the one that just called. I apologize. The forum, as you all know, this is not the way I had hoped it would all be, but due to circumstances absolutely beyond our control and out of abundance of caution, we decided that this is the way it had to be. So we're going to do the best we can with what we got here. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Katy and Sam for their willingness to give public service. I mean, that in and of itself is amazing. And so the coalition thanks you for your interest and willingness to work on, work with us and work for the city and work for the betterment of constituents. You're muted, Sam. Can you unmute? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question. And this question, some of these questions have a very short time frame because there's a lot you can say in a minute or a minute and a half, and some just require a yes, a no, or whatever. So this first question is going to be 60 seconds. And we're going to start in alphabetical order by last name, and then we'll rotate who goes first and who goes second. So nobody is always in a first or second position. It's crazy. So here's the first question. Do you support or oppose the no camping ordinance 4118, and why? You can have up to 1 minute to answer, starting with Sam.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Did you say alphabetical order? You wanted me to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Just want to thank you all for your leadership, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Let's jump right in. I do support the anti-camping ordinance 4118. It's not going to solve our homelessness crisis. We have to build more affordable housing and build a better social safety net for folks who have mental health and addiction issues. But what it does is it will move people out of encampments and interim housing into interim housing faster and with urgency, because every day 5 people are dying on the streets of Los Angeles, and that's unacceptable. And our Triple H approach to homelessness is to build a very expensive housing very slowly, has led to 1,000 units, but 6,000 people who've experiencing homelessness have died in that same 5-year period. I support the current approach, which is to lead with services, not police officers.
15 seconds.
You provide notice to people who are on the streets, and what it will do is it's a valuable tool for the city to make sure our streets and our parks, our neighborhoods are clean and safe while we do the hard work of building housing long-term.
Okay. Katie, you're on.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your leadership. I'm looking forward to getting to know those of you who I don't already know. So 4118 says where people can't be camped out, and it makes sense, those places. But I don't think we should enforce it unless we're going to move people into interim housing. I think as we can clear particular locations and connect people to housing and services, that's what we should do. And we should prioritize those places where, as communities, we want to have access to those spaces again. And so for me, the way we can quickly get people off the streets and connected to housing and services is by doubling down on interim housing solutions in the short term. So that's everything from safe camping and safe parking to tiny homes, to adaptive reuse of commercial buildings, motels and hotels, et cetera. We have to get people off the streets as quickly
15.
as possible and connected to housing and services. Prevention is also really important too. It's a lot less expensive and a lot more humane to keep people housed than to wait until they're on the streets before we connect them to housing and services. And then finally, mental health. We need some new tools to help people who can't help themselves off the streets.
Okay, it's a complicated issue. It's a complicated issue. And what we're trying to do is get your top of mind sense of it. And you'll have many, many other opportunities to go in depth on these issues in the various public forums that you will be invited to. So here's a question. Here is a scenario. A homeless encampment exists in an area not covered by the no camping ordinance, but homeowners believe it poses a danger to the neighborhood. As council member, what would you do? Katie, you're first. Please unmute. 1 minute.
Yeah, so we all deserve to feel safe in our neighborhoods and our communities. And as a mom to 3 little kids who lives near some tents and some encampments, I know that this is something that we're all struggling with, and figuring out how to handle this effectively, quickly, and compassionately is the #1 priority of local government. And so I think what we need to do is work with the nonprofit providers, with LAPD, with the community, to figure out what's happening at that site, figure out what needs to happen so that people feel safer, so that it is a safe encampment, and then as quickly as possible be connecting those people to housing and services. We cannot allow people to continue to live and die on our streets. It's completely unacceptable. And so getting people a path out and into interim housing is going to be my #1 priority. And because I've been at the county for the last 6 years, I have relationships. I understand that the county and the city need to be working really closely together on provision of services and housing. And so for me, that's the #1 priority, is getting people off the streets, connected to housing and services.
Thank you. The next question. Oh, Sam, you have to answer. Yes.
So this is not a hypothetical. This is a reality every single day throughout the 5th Council District. As a father of 4 kids, we don't go to our parks anymore. We're scared to go to our libraries with our kids. Neighborhoods are feeling really concerned about their safety in a lot of different reasons. And public safety is the primary responsibility of local government. No other level of government will do this. So let's break this down. If there are crimes taking place there, we need to enforce our laws so if people feel safe, and there are consequences. If it's mental health issues, we have to get the LAPD out of that work and invest in mental health and social workers. Right now, LAPD responds to 140,000 phone calls every year related to homelessness, and that's why they're under resource to get to the real guns and the gangs affecting us. So, and in terms of the ordinance, it does allow for public safety issues to be brought up if a showing is made, if evidence is provided, and if extraordinary circumstances are met, the ordinance can also apply there. So we need to use every tool possible so that neighborhoods feel safe and the people who are on the streets get the help.
Thank you. All good answers, all need elaboration, and you'll get there. Okay, the next question was Sam starting. within CD5, where are the 3 most problematic homeless encampments? Just bullet them off, 45 seconds. Sam?
For me, parks are paramount. They're special. They're holy ground. They should not be places where families can't use them. So Westwood Park is, large parts of it are just unusable anymore. They're Needles and Aiden's Place. That's
Where
one.
else?
I'm going to also add, and I would add Pan Pacific and Rancho Park as well as parks. 1, 2 is our underpasses, especially when we get near other districts. They're just impassable anymore, and it's really terrible. And then up and down, I would say near the south part of the district, Robertson, La Cienega.
15.
These big boulevards have been next to schools. There's a lot of complaints, and it's just not safe anymore.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, you don't have to talk the whole time. You can talk a shorter amount of time if you want. Okay, Katie, what are the 3 most problematic homeless encampments? 1.
Yeah, 1, Westwood Park. My mom and stepfather live just south of there and used to take my kids there after sleepovers in the mornings, and they don't go there anymore. And so that's the first. The second is just outside of Beverly Hills city limits, where it hits the west side in our district. Fancy that there's encampments there, and that there up and down, north and south, just outside of Beverly Hills, adjacent to Pico, on Pico. And then underpasses, you know, it rotates depending on when the last sweep was, but you know, all the underpasses
15.
adjacent to and in CD5.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. As council member, what will you do to prevent homelessness in CD5? You have a minute. Katie, you're first.
Yeah, so prevention is really key, right? And we're starting to realize, we being government, is starting to realize that we need to be spending money upstream. So connecting with people before they become unhoused. And the good news is that local government, particularly the county, already knows who those housing vulnerable populations are, because they're already accessing county services. So seniors on a fixed income, people aging out of the foster care system, older folks on a fixed income, LGBTQ youth, et cetera, et cetera. And so we already are touching those people in government right now. And so we should be also providing additional resources to keep them housed, make sure they know about tenant protections, giving them access to one-time grants and loans if they get sick and they don't have paid sick leave, and so they're behind on rent, if they have a medical emergency. There are other places like Chicago that do this really well, and I think we need to be focused on the prevention side. And so I'm really glad you asked the question, because for me, we cannot begin to wrap our arms around the homeless crisis until we focus additional resources on prevention. And we're spending a very small
15.
percentage of our overall housing budget on prevention. And so we can do a lot more of it and still maybe only be spending 5-10% of our overall housing budget on prevention.
Okay.
It's not,
Time. So can you see when I hold up this card? Can you can both see this? It says
I saw that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Marcia, it's hard to hear you sometimes say 15 because I'm talking and Sam's
Okay.
talking. So the sign is helpful. I don't know if you have a 15-second sign, but
I do have a 15-second sign. So
Okay.
thank you for I thank you for telling me that. Okay, next question. No,
Marshall,
Sam.
again. Yes. So we know the reasons why people fall into homelessness, but the city and the county are not doing enough to prevent people from falling into homelessness. Pre-pandemic, for every 2 people we housed, 3 fell into homelessness. I've spent the last decade as a pro bono lawyer and as a nonprofit leader with Bedside Legal Services, preventing homelessness with tenant protections. I support a right to counsel for low-income tenants so they don't fall into homelessness. We got to invest in more money so folks with rent subsidies in Section 8, and then customize services to address the reasons why people fall in beyond just economic reasons. Leading cause of homelessness among women is domestic violence. There needs to be a unique response there, and the county is not doing a good job there. The foster care system is broken. The 3/4 of all young people on the streets fell out or aged out. The majority of them are LGBTQ youth. And if the county's not going to do a good job, we need to invest as the city with nonprofits and partner with them so that we do not have an explosion of homelessness once the eviction moratorium goes away, because that's what I'm really worried about will happen unless we're ready and we have the leaders in place to help people before they become homeless.
Okay, thank you. Next, so we've talked about some homelessness and prevention, but how would you deliver mental health services and addiction treatment to homeless in CD5? You have a minute. Sam, we start with you.
As many of us know, the city of Los Angeles does not have a health department. There's no mental health department. We rely entirely on the county. We give them a check of several $100 million a year. And I think we all agree the results have been really ineffective. And there's been poor data, poor transparency, and horrible coordination. In fact, we're co-defendants in multiple lawsuits pointing the finger at each other. I would support pivoting money from the bloated county bureaucracy to more customized responses like talked about, LGBTQ youth, foster care, domestic violence, those approaches. And also we need to get more health beds for folks who are having mental health breakdowns. The county, for 10.5 million people, only provides 81 residential psych beds. We have to be building those beds. And then addiction services is critical. If the county's not going to do it, there's nonprofits that are doing God's work really effectively, really efficiently. They do a lot with less. I think that's a better use of our dollars. And then what we have to do is get police officers out of this work. They're not trained and will want to do 5150 hold mental health determinations. That isn't the work that should be in the hands of mental health professionals and social workers, and will be safer and will get better results.
Okay, thank you. Katie, you're up.
Thanks. So during the first few months of COVID, I served as our interim public health deputy in Supervisor Kuehl's office, and it became abundantly clear to me that there wasn't good coordination between the county and city during the pandemic or anything else health related. And I support exploring the possibility of the city of Los Angeles creating its own health department. I think we should seriously consider that because of the breakdown in communication and partnership. The county, as you probably know, provides all of these services: mental health, physical health, addiction services, and they're provided through both county employees and then also service nonprofit providers. And so my first day in office, I'm going to call the two supervisors whose districts overlap with CD5, Supervisor Mitchell and whoever replaces Supervisor Kuehl, and make sure we're having standing weekly meetings staff to staff so that all of the people on the streets experiencing homelessness are being connected one by one to the care and services they need. I agree with Sam, we should get police officers out of the business of doing homelessness provision work. It should be handled by social workers and public health experts.
Okay, stop. Thank you. All good answers. Nikki, can you email Don Lowe's? He doesn't have the Zoom link. So can you email it to Don Lowe's, please?
Sure, we'll do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn this over now to Mike Eveloff, who's going to ask some questions about affordable housing. Mike, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Katie, it's nice to see you on a screen. Thanks you for the book recommendation. And Sam, how are you feeling?
I'm fine. Good to see you, Mike.
Excellent. Okay, so my first question is, how do you define affordable housing? And I think I have 45 seconds each. And I'm supposed to start with Katie.
So it's a really interesting question. And back when I first graduated from UCLA Law School, I was a land use attorney for a while at a firm downtown. And it was interesting to me that there was this very technical definition in state law that said what affordable housing is. And it's a percentage of area median income. And very low is some percentage, affordable is this. And so that's what the state defines affordable housing as being, is a percentage of local area median income. But I think when people more broadly just sort of colloquially talk about affordable housing, they mean it to mean all sorts of things. It's like, when I talk about it, I mean, can I afford it? Can people I know who are fleeing for other states because they're priced out afford it? Or can people who are working in CD5 but can't afford to live here afford it? So for me, when I talk about affordable housing colloquially, I mean, is it affordable to the people who would like to live and work here who might not be able to, or in other parts of the city that are being priced out of other parts of the city and are moving up to Palmdale or fleeing entirely to another state? So, there's I think two ways people think about affordable housing. There's the technical definition, and then there's also the colloquial definition.
Marsha, I'm going to rely on you for timing, if that's okay.
You want the times that I have on the questionnaire on the?
No, just put up the 15-second.
Okay, so
can you do, just put your sign up.
All right, Eduardo, you'll have to time the speaker on each question, not the total time. So we'll change that. Okay.
Sam, would you like a turn?
Of course. So there's actually a chart that the state provides, area median income, based off of the number of members of your household, right? And the county you're in Los Angeles County, that's around $40,000. And that's why we're in this huge mess, because there's that inflexible approach, and there'll be these TOC projects built near all of our homes, and there'll be 40 units built, and maybe 8%, 10% will be very affordable. So it'll be 3 or 4 new units, assuming they get in the hands of folks who are low income. That it's, even if that does, that's a drop in the bucket. Usually it doesn't. There's no public registry, enforcement, accountability. They actually, most of them are vacant or go to the friends of the developers. But that when I talk about affordable housing, I talk about workforce housing. I talk about the people who teach our kids and put out our fires and build our buildings and work for us.
15.
Need to be able to afford to live in this community. It does not make sense for folks to drive an hour or 2 to the west side to work in our job centers and serve our communities. We have to be able to, and they should be spending half, and if they want to choose to do so, they should be spending the majority of their income.
Great. Thank you both. What we have seen, and Sam, you alluded to it, is that there are density bonus programs that claim to provide affordable housing. My question is, do you believe that affordable housing is being built as it needs to, and if you can address TOC and also density bonus projects, and if you disagree those programs are working, what would you do to fix it?
Yeah.
And,
I don't.
How much time?
60 seconds, starting with Sam.
I don't think TOC is working. If it was meant to be a driver and generator of massive new affordable housing units, right? That's what developers get. They get this windfall of height and setbacks and all these parking restrictions being loosened in exchange for more units, and they get the sliding scale, right, on depending on where they are and what they're providing. But what they're doing is the least number of units for the the folks who are lowest income. Again, there's no enforcement, no public registry, no accountability. No one has been sued or held accountable, and we all know what's happening anecdotally. They're just vacant or going to the friends of the developers. Same thing with 1818, right? It's not actually generating the affordable housing that we need. We're far behind. It's not creating any workforce. There's no incentives there, and then there's been litigation on this issue as well. So I'd like to see. Right. So what matters is a council member who's going to come in and be proactive and try to find community wins for every project that gets built and mitigate any adverse effects of any project. And I'm going to be focusing on workforce. That's where we really need that missing middle. And I'll stop.
Okay.
Great, Katie.
So no, TOC and the density bonus program aren't working. It's creating a lot of expensive market rate housing along our commercial corridors, and the affordability provisions aren't being enforced. So instead, we need to be laser focused on building new affordable and workforce housing near our jobs. And traffic on the west side is awful, and I think we have an incredible opportunity to rethink our land use planning on the west side to put affordable and workforce housing at our job centers, right? We have Century City, we have UCLA, we have Cedars. These are the largest job centers outside of downtown LA. And most of the people who work there can't afford to live anywhere near there. And as a result, we have all this cut through traffic and it's impossible to get anywhere. So we need to do updated community planning and decide together where we want to put that density. And then we need to go to the state and the federal government and demand that we get our fair share of money to be building affordable and workforce housing and partnering with developers to buy down affordability in those projects. And then we need to work to expand rent control at the state level.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. You both talked about a need for affordable housing. Can you talk for a full 45 seconds? Because I want all your policy in 45 seconds. A full 45 seconds on how do you build housing when we have a shortage of critical infrastructure, including simple things like water or police or fire? How will you approve housing, affordable housing, if the infrastructure is deficient? And I get to start with Katie.
Yeah, so this is why back to the need for updated community planning. If we agree as a community together where we want to put this housing, and then city departments can do the work to build up the infrastructure, That's how we do this. We don't just add density everywhere. We do it strategically in our centers, near our jobs, near our metro coming through. We have a huge opportunity to be putting that housing near transportation that the people living it will actually use. So I took the lead on developing Measure W, which because I know that we need to create loads of new local water sources for Los Angeles. Same thing with our infrastructure around public safety. And if we know where the density is going to go, then we can make sure we're allocating in budgets years in advance additional funding for those stations for public safety.
Sam?
To answer your actual specific question, I'm not going to support development that will put a drain on infrastructure at a time when our roads and our streets and our grids and our sewers are falling apart. By some accounts, we're 40 years overdue for repairs, and adding this, adding ad hoc units and density in neighborhoods without focusing on emergency services and focusing on infrastructure. And we're down to 9,400 police officers, down from 10,000 as well. We have a surplus now in the city of Los Angeles, believe it or not. We're not filling roles in our city government. We've benefited from the economy, so we're paying down our pensions. We have $1 billion and potentially many billion coming from the federal government to rebuild our infrastructure, and that will be a priority for me as a council member.
I'm going to do a quick follow-up here. Katie, you talked about community plans. There are some services, such as water. The water goes everywhere. It doesn't matter where in the city you are. Police and fire, same thing. So if police, fire, et cetera, are inadequate, how do you put housing anywhere? Katie, let's go for you for a quick 30 seconds.
My background is in infrastructure. That's what I spent the last 6 years doing is creating funding streams and creating programs to build out and modernize our region's infrastructure, both on the power and electricity side, on the water side as well. And having worked in government, I understand that we have a lot of work to do in terms of making sure we have the resources we need. The federal government has just approved a huge amount of money for infrastructure, and I know how to grab it. I know how to leverage pots of money. That's what I've been doing at the county for the last 6 years. And so I'll bring those resources to District 5.
Thanks, Katie. Sam?
So I think we need to be talking about right now about the future of Los Angeles, right? It's obviously we're going to be growing in population with the new push for density, but there is no plan right now to build up our infrastructure. And that's something I'll be focusing on as well. And I know we can't do it alone. The private sector is going to be part of this as well. When we have these opportunities for smart developments that make sense in neighborhoods, we can really use that. It's going to be a Band-Aid. It's not perfect, but at least for that part of town, for that neighborhood, we're going to improve the infrastructure, emergency services, improve the fire station, the park, everything nearby.
Okay. Last question in this area. Where should affordable housing be built? CD5 tends to have some of the most expensive real estate anywhere, and I've seen reports that affordable units are costing $600,000, $700,000. Where in the city, including CD5, should affordable housing be built, and why? And we're going to start with Katie. And 60 seconds, please.
So I think we should look at adaptive reuse of our underutilized commercial buildings. One of the things that COVID has done is it's caused us all to work from home a lot more. And I think some percentage of people won't ever go back full time. And so we have a lot of empty and mostly empty commercial buildings all around District 5 and across the city. And that presents a real opportunity for us to adaptively reuse those buildings and convert them into affordable and workforce housing, also homeless housing. And I think we should do that. And the cost per square foot of adaptive reuse is a lot less than ground up construction, especially right now because of global supply chain issues and the cost of labor and everything. So we should be looking at being really strategic about acquiring at this moment in this time where we have all this vacant space at a discount and reusing it for housing. And I agree with you that CD5, the real estate is very expensive. And so you're not going to get as much bang for your buck if you do ground up construction, and there's not a lot of space for it. But adaptive reuse is where it's at.
Okay.
Thank you, Katie. Sam?
Okay, in terms of building new affordable housing, it needs to be on the commercial corridors. I strongly oppose SB 9 and 10 and their prior cousins, 50 and the other ones. I was loud and early in our HOA in Comstock Hills we were active against it as well. But beyond just building, because you're right, $500,000 per unit, taking 6 years to do it is never going to make a dent here. What we should also be doing is focusing on preserving every single affordable housing unit, rent controlled unit. That's the best ROI that we can possibly have. Make sure we don't get evicted or those units are not Ellis. And we have to acquire apartment buildings at much lower cost, or hotels and motels at much lower cost. And yes, adaptive reuse works too. There's some historical preservation, other issues too, but that is part of the tool chest. But we need all of that. We need to build faster and cheaper on the commercial corridors. We have to preserve every single unit and fight for it, and then acquire and adaptively reuse commercial and existing housing that exists.
Thank you. Marcia, I think you're up.
Yeah.
Sorry for messing up all the questions, but you did well adapting.
Okay. Okay. It's a good thing I'm a multitasker here, because I'm trying to admit people and do the timing and ask the questions and watch the candidates, and I'm going to have to go back and watch the recording, that's for sure. Okay, so you touched on the TOC. Just to clarify, I want to get a support or oppose TOC from each candidate. So let's see, starting with Sam. Do you support or oppose TOCs?
It's binding now. I've been pending an appeal. I think it's flawed. I'm not going to fight against a TOC, but I think we need to entirely improve it.
Okay, I need a support or oppose.
I support TOC projects.
Okay, and Katie?
I support TOC with enforcement of affordability provisions.
Okay, thank you. So TOCs allow residential developers to put in less parking in exchange for including 10% low-income housing in otherwise market rate buildings. Since the building cannot accommodate all the cars, people park on the streets, which then become congested. How would you handle this problem in CD5? We have 60 seconds. Start with Katy.
Well, I think we need to continue to build out our alternative transportation infrastructure. I mean, the whole premise of TOC is that the people living it are supposed to take transportation other than their cars, which we know isn't happening because most of the people who live in that market rate housing have cars, and they're not going to take the bus, and they live nowhere near a metro station. So I would have liked to have seen TOC tighten to be closer to transportation that people living there will actually use, but it's not. So in the absence of that, and even generally, we should be building out our transportation infrastructure, as quickly as possible, and leveraging those federal dollars to accelerate finishing all those metro lines. And I think also we need more bike infrastructure. This should be the best bike city in the world, right? We have great weather, we have mostly flat land, and it's kind of spread out. So we have an opportunity to do that in a way that also minimizes impacts to the community surrounding it. I live on a street that's next to a big busy street, and there's all sorts of cut through traffic. So we need to incorporate good creative strategies to avoid that as well.
Thank you. Sam.
Yes. So this is a huge issue in my neighborhood in Comstock Hills. I live 2 blocks north of the Century City Mall in Century City, and we're fortunate to have some permanent parking protecting us, but if we didn't, we'd be overrun. I think we can all agree that we have a dearth of parking in our neighborhoods and a lot of our commercial corridors. There's been a lack of leadership and planning, and it's only going to get worse. There's been some really bad proposals like 1401 to eliminate all parking minimums. I oppose it. I don't think we need to at this point make parking optional for new developments. And yes, TOC makes these allowances, but I think a proactive council member could come in and negotiate better deals. I think we shouldn't just accept the fact that we have to deal with TOC's regulations. Our neighborhoods and our small businesses are going to suffer with the loss of parking. And over time, yes, we'll go to more and more public transportation and bikes, and people will walk. And I do that as much as I can. We're not there yet. So I think this parking is a serious issue that I'm not going to just roll over. We're going to fight with neighbors to make sure that we build parking where we need.
Okay. So let's assume that a developer is coming in under TOC, the neighborhood opposes it. What are you going to do? How are you going to protect the neighborhoods? That's what we're all about. how do we protect and preserve neighborhoods? So what will you do to protect the neighborhood? I'm going to give you each 45 seconds. And Sam, I think I'll start with you.
Yeah. So each council member, even if TOC is now increasingly ministerial and there's less discretion, council members have power and influence. Developers will reach out to them and their lobbyists will, and I'm sure Katie's already been contacted by a lot of these folks, and I have too, and I'm not taking the meetings. What we're gonna do is we have to have conversations in the very beginning. Where we're going to talk about there's going to be adverse effects of every project need to be discussed and try and come up with mitigation, whether it's parking, traffic, infrastructure, emergency services, and create community benefits and make sure every project is a win-win-win. I know that's not always easy if things are ministerial and by right, but the council member still has powers, neighbors still have power, whether it's litigation or appeals or 245ing projects, to the extent that continues to exist. There are tools that I'll exercise.
Okay. Katie?
Yeah, so TOC is really a Band-Aid in my mind. I think what we need to be doing is community planning as communities, and the stakeholders in communities need to come together and decide where the density is going to go and what our communities are going to look like. And that's the only way we're going to create livable, vibrant, healthy neighborhoods for ourselves and our kids. And you know, as someone who has worked in the planning and land use space, my job as a council member is to fight on behalf of my communities. And that means working, our office serves as a place for negotiating those concerns and navigating it as a community. But I don't think we should be in the business of, I don't love that we have to do this ad hoc project by project, spending all of our time and energy fighting all the time. It would be nice if we could create a vision together and then allow it to be developed and executed.
Okay. AB 1401 eliminates parking mandates for homes and commercial buildings near transit or in neighborhoods with low rates of car use in counties with more than 600,000 residents. Do you support or oppose AB 1401? And do you think it applies to CD5? 45 seconds, and we'll start with Katie.
So I think the reality is that most people in CD5 who can afford a car have a car. And that's because our houses are nowhere near where we work for the most part. I do support in concept the idea where it makes sense because people are living in housing and there's excellent transportation available that they're actually going to use. So if 1401 was tightened to really be around metro stations and in places where there was a really high ratio of, or a low ratio where people lived where they worked. So like Century City, for example, I could see reduced parking minimums there, but not necessarily as it's currently constituted.
Okay. Sam?
I oppose 1401. I've said that publicly. All the candidates have been asked before, and I'm the only candidate in this race who opposed it categorically. And I don't think Sacramento should be telling us where and how parking should be mandated, or telling us we can't mandate parking in our own, protect our own neighborhoods. These are local land use decisions made best by the stakeholders and the representatives those stakeholders elect. And in general, I think Sacramento should be getting out of our way on these issues. That's not their job. I don't think constitutionally they have that right either. And you know, think about conceptually, right? Westwood Village or Beverly Boulevard or Pico, if you start taking away parking and build a lot of housing, the small businesses and neighborhoods are going to suffer. So even in specific scenarios, I couldn't imagine it working.
Okay, thank you. Sam, you alluded to it, but I want to just clarify. Will you use City Charter Section 245 to oppose developments in TOCs? 45 seconds. Sam, you're first.
Yeah, I think that is a tool it's a tool that council members have. It should be used sparingly, not for every project. But if there's an exceedingly bad project that we've tried every tool to make it better and to make it a win-win, I would use it to protect neighborhoods.
Katie?
We have a lot of corruption right now at City Hall, and most of that corruption is tied to land use and the currying of favor in connection with just this sort of thing, you know, site-specific approvals. And I think to the extent possible, we should keep the council offices out of that. And the way we do that, like I said earlier, I'm a broken record, is by updating community plans and then allowing people to build to the community plans, saying no more variances, no more exceptions. And if you want an exception, then it has to go through a process, which is the planning department process. And then that should be final. I don't think it's appropriate for me. I think that bad projects, the APC and the Planning Commission and Plum will know about. And I'll do everything in my power as the council member to make sure that they know that I don't support that project. I think 245 is subject to abuse. And so I'm going to try and avoid it as much as possible.
Okay. Parking on commercial streets is being reduced to add bus and bicycle lanes. This negatively impacts businesses which lose customers for lack of available parking. What will you do to help local businesses gain more parking? Katie, you're first, and that's 1 minute.
Okay, can you just clarify, was there a particular street? I didn't hear the beginning. Or
It just says
generally?
commercial streets. On commercial streets.
So I think, this is, when you have increased pedestrian activity, including bikes and people walking around, business activity goes up. The counter is that you lose parking, right? And so one of the things I had an opportunity to work on when I was a land use attorney was shared parking agreements and creating community parking plans. And I think that there's an opportunity to bring the business community together along any particular commercial corridor and figure out what it should look like. So is it a shared valet service? Is it utilizing a mostly empty church parking lot on the weekends or during the day or at night? Often banks have space that's open at night. So we can identify all the parking through doing a parking study, and then figure out how together we're going to collectively manage those parking spaces. And that's how we can mitigate the impacts.
15.
That's it.
Okay.
So this is a huge issue right here, right now in La Brea in CD5. And I've spoken to some of those business owners who are saying, we are on the brink. We are barely surviving as it is. And now you're taking away an extra hour in the morning and during rush hour of parking, an extra hour in the evening during rush hour parking. We're not going to survive. There was no outreach to these businesses. There was the things that Katie's identifying, yes, should have happened by the county and the MTA and the city. Didn't happen, right? We're thinking about taking this away, but these are what we're going to do to make life easier for you. We can't do it years after the fact. So I would not support changing these parking rules until we have those things in place, whether it's shared parking, whether it's we have some different agreements in place with vacant lots, and we have a whole lot of vacant lots, and the city and the county own a lot of land. This is entirely backwards. We have to provide a solution before we exacerbate the problem. And I think it's a perfect example of how the city and the county just are not doing a good job of putting neighborhoods and small businesses and the residents first. They're steamrolling an idea that we have to have this bus lane from the south all the way to Sunset.
Stop. So would either of you require the building of parking lots before a bus or a bike lane goes in? Sam, just to follow on, would you require, as council member, would you require a parking lot?
So I'll use the example of other cities and I'll answer the question.
Take 10 seconds. You got 10 seconds.
We'll follow the model of Culver City and Beverly Hills, which have built great parking lots and bike lanes. We can do it, and it's a win-win. And those commercial places are vibrant. Okay,
Katie.
Yeah, a lot of places have parking structures that we don't even realize are there. They're sort of hiding in plain sight. So we should do a parking analysis first. And if we need a new one, then sure, we should build a new one. If it's already there, then we shouldn't have to build a new one.
Okay, thank
Martha,
you.
can I ask a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Quick. There's a building in Westwood. It's a doctor's office, and they got a huge reduction in parking for bicycles. I just don't see a lot of patients riding bikes into the doctor. Do you really believe, do you have any proof that you can have 4 bicycle bicycle spots and it actually displaces a car? Do you think that's actually true? Katie first, 15 seconds for Marcia.
I don't think I understand the question. I mean, I thought this was a question about building bike infrastructure, and then we needed.
Oh, I just was relating to a previous question.
Mike, let me ask the next question because the next
Okay.
question directly addresses that. So
Super.
here's the next question. Newly constructed commercial buildings are being permitted to reduce 1 parking space for every 4 bicycle parking spaces installed. Would you support a developer who wants to reduce parking and instead add bicycle spaces, and why? You have a minute. Sam, you're first.
And not without significant evidence that the population in that area already uses bikes, that the residents here are going to be likely bike users. We know folks who are older, small kids, folks with disabilities are not likely to be biking. I think biking is a valuable addition to the first and last mile to get to transit in certain parts of our district. I think incredibly valuable, especially with transit coming, and especially with UCLA, a big part of our district. But those are specific situations where it would be I think highly utilized. So I need to see the evidence. I wouldn't support it without learning more.
Okay, Katie?
So I think it depends where the project is. I think it depends whether it's near a bike network, whether it's near transportation, whether it's near a lot of housing, workforce housing. And it depends on sort of what the short-term infrastructure planning is for that neighborhood. So is there going to be a bike network built in the next couple of years?
Okay.
So it's all site specific.
Okay.
Context matters.
Okay.
No, but Marcia, but do you approve, would you approve replacing the parking spaces with bike spaces where there isn't a bike network already?
Sam first.
I'm highly skeptical. I don't think so.
Okay, Katie?
Probably not.
Okay. I just want to ask one of the people in the room, it's a name I don't recognize, and I'm going to ask B. Zohar. Could you please tell me what HOA you represent?
That's Don Lowe's, Marcia.
Oh, that's down Lowe's. Okay, thank you. Just checking. Doing my job here. Okay, so just as a note regarding the bike lane stuff, you know, when you have these kinds of bonuses, the only thing that happens is the cars park on the street, block residential, block driveways, and don't accommodate, let's say, commercial customers that are trying to do business. So this is the problem. It's the problem of you're trying to solve one problem and then there's a bump in the carpeting because you've moved the problem to some other problem. So I think we have to be aware of that. I wanted to ask the next question. Do you support or oppose new housing developments at the same time as there are severe water shortages? That's 30 seconds. We'll start with Sam.
We obviously we have a massive affordable housing crisis, so, and a workforce housing crisis. So I think we can do both. Is that we continue to find ways to preserve, acquire, and build more affordable workforce housing in the right places on the commercial corridors, while we do more to conserve and improve our water infrastructure, and work with our partners in the other agencies and municipalities to do that.
Okay, Katie.
So we're in drought, but we're also in the process of transforming our water infrastructure. And that's a lot of the work that I did at the county was around upgrading our infrastructure to make us less reliant on imported water. And I agree with Sam that we have an affordable and workforce housing crisis, and we need to be building housing. And at the same time, we need to be updating our infrastructure. And as council member, I'll prioritize making sure we have the infrastructure we need for the next 100 years, so that people who live here, our kids and their kids, can live here and thrive. And when they turn on the faucet, water comes out. We can be doing both at the same time, and we have to be.
Okay, thank you. You both oppose SB 9 and SB 10. As council member, what will you do to preserve R1 zoning and keep zoning under local control? You have a minute and a half.
Who's first?
First is Katie.
So I actually just was asked to write a letter to the state historic board. I live in South Carthage in an old duplex, and I did, and I sent in a letter expressing my support for the Carthages becoming historic, National Historic Registry sites, because I think that the history is really important to preserve. I think that there are a lot of tools that we have available like that. To keep single family neighborhoods as single family neighborhoods. But
So what
as
are you
all-
going to do? The
I'm-
question is, what are you as council person going to do?
I was just going to start
Okay,
doing that. So SB 9 and 10 have become law. So I think what we can do is work on overturning that law, work on showing the value proposition of putting the housing that we know we need elsewhere, coming up proactively with plans and places to put that housing, and fighting back against this notion that SB 9 and 10 are going to solve our housing crises, which it's just not. It's not going to solve our housing crisis. We need affordable and workforce housing. We need better tenant and rent control protections, and those are the things that I'm going to be fighting for while I use the tools available to me, land use tools, to make sure we're doing what we can to keep density near job centers and transportation.
good, thank you. Sam?
Yes. Cities, as we all know, have an opportunity to adopt regulations about the implementation of SB 9. That's actually in the law. We were hoping that our city council would pass a law before the end of the year. That didn't happen. There's a council file 21-14-14 that I support that has safeguards in there, right? This was dubbed as a duplex bill. It does a lot more than that. It's pretty vague. Potentially 6 or more, or 8 units could get built. The SB 14-14 would limit it to 4 on 2 lots. It has parking rules, setback rules. Sensitive areas are protected, like high fire severity and hillsides. And most importantly, also the historical HPOZs, areas that are designated by the city and the county to be protected. So that's one. 2 is we have to enforce the residency affidavit and other aspects of this. We got to enforce the rules. We have to make it difficult and for developers to flip these which they plan to do. I also support statewide ballot proposition and litigation. I'm not going to. I don't support 9. I've just been loud and public about it for years. My HOA has been active on it with United Neighbors. I'm not going. I didn't jump on this bandwagon to oppose it at the last minute. So I'm going to fight it. These decisions need to be made at the local level. They need to, if we are going to have these rules, they have to mandate affordability. They have to take into account infrastructure and emergency services, and they cannot lead to gentrification, which are all the things that SB 9 will do. And that's why I opposed it, and that's why I'm fighting, and will continue to fight against it.
Okay, thank you. Here's a scenario. Someone wants to expand his house, even though the house is in an HPOZ, it's HPOZ. And the HOA opposes modifications, and the Planning Commission declined the homeowner's request. Would you use City Charter Section 245 to overrule the Planning Commission? 15 seconds is sort of a yes or no.
To allow the person to expand in an HPOZ?
Yes.
Is it to me?
Sorry, Sam. Sorry.
Sam, you go first.
I would not. I don't think that's an appropriate use of 245.
Okay, Katie?
I wouldn't.
Okay. And I'm sorry, but I reversed that order, so I apologize. LA has significant housing goals to meet under the state. LA has significant housing goals to meet under the state mandated regional housing needs allocation, RHNA. As the population gets more dense, what will you do to preserve existing open space and expand the inventory of open space and rec facilities in CD5? Sam, you're first.
Sure.
Oh, it's 60 seconds.
First, we have to stand up to any idea that we should turn our parks into homeless housing or supportive or affordable housing. That was that idea that was proposed in Rancho Park. And I worked with the Chevy and Rancho folks there to say that was a bad idea. And I called our council member about it and worked with Rob Bouchon on that. So we have to identify that's a non-starter. If anything, I think we need more parks. Only 60% of Angelenos live within a 20-minute walk of a park. We know in the pandemic that that's a critical issue, especially for folks who are more lower income and renters and don't have green space. I think we need more park space, more parklets. I was so proud that in the Westwood community, as when we built our library 15 years ago, we also built a little pocket park on Glendon. And those are the types of things that I'll do, is to use our discretionary funding to build more pocket parks and expand our parks. I believe that Westwood Park should be expanded. There's a GWP lot next door that could be a good candidate for expansion. And as part of that, we can improve our infrastructure and we have to improve our tree canopy and our sidewalks as well. We have Quimby dollars that are not being used, and that'll be a priority for me as a council member.
Okay, thank you. Katie?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify on the newsletter that was sent around yesterday. It said that I support unhoused people being in Westwood Park, and I support moving those people into housing. I think we need that park to be available for everybody. And people who are living in the parks, all of our parks should be connected to housing and services as quickly as possible. Huge priority for me. The second thing is that everybody should be able to walk to a park. And right now that's not really the case. Fortunately, we have in every neighborhood on purpose, because that's the way LAUSD planned it, we have schools and use agreements between the city and school districts for the community to use on the weekend, and to turn school sites into parks and open space and community hubs is a priority for me. And it's one of the things I worked on when we were developing Measure W, was thinking about and figuring out how we were going to put money into schools to create true community centers. And we can put parks there, and then we can create a lot of parklets and strategically buy parcels and build pocket parks.
Thank you. Do you support or oppose outdoor advertising in the public right of way beyond what is already allowed by code for transit shelters? 15 seconds. Katie, you're first.
As a general rule, I think we should have less. And so to the extent I have authority to minimize sort of the visual pollution that we have in our city, I will use that authority to minimize it.
Thank you.
Why I'm not taking money from developers, and I'm not developers, billboard people.
Okay. Sam?
Yeah, I'm not taking money from billboard companies or developers or PACs or corporate money of any kind, just individuals as well. I will not support more billboards. I'm not going to support the expansion of digital, which is a big push right now. But more importantly, we need to enforce our darn rules. And it's a big pattern throughout our city. 1,600 unpermitted or altered signs exist, and Department of Building and Safety are not doing their job to enforce it, and I will.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next. You both have experience working for law firms. Sam, you first worked for Jones Day and then Proskauer Rose, and now you have your own firm of Marino Yebri. Katy, your first job out of law school was with Latham and Watkins. In what ways did these experiences prepare you to represent CD5 homeowners and residents in the land use issues? Sam, you're first.
Sure. So,
and you have 1 minute.
Okay, terrific. So I've never been a registered lobbyist, a land use lawyer. So I never had clients for whom I had to lobby against neighborhoods on behalf of companies or projects. So I did not have that experience, but with experience I do have is one, I'm a small business owner. If elected to be the only council member of the 15 who owns a business, pays payroll tax, workers' comp, has a business tax. That's a perspective that's missing. I think the policies show that. I'm a litigator. I've taken real estate and business and employment cases to trial and appeal, and I have some landmark victories in the arbitration space, for example. But I also am a mediator. So I know how to fight to the death if necessary. I also know how to bring people together with shared goals, shared interests, and get things done. I think those are valuable perspectives here. And I'm going to have top-notch planning deputies and a team with me. In terms of planning, community is going to be paramount for me because that's where I come from. I'm a community leader. I'm a HOA leader, and I've worked on land use issues with my HOA. And that's the perspective I'm going to bring, is putting the neighborhood on the forefront.
Okay, Katy?
Yeah, so after UCLA Law School, I spent 4.5 years or so at Latham as a land use attorney. And it was a really interesting experience. I went to a firm because I had $100,000 of debt, and I wanted to do something that involved planning because I was interested in the built environment. And I learned a lot about what stakeholder process looks like, and how a good development could improve a community, and how a bad development made a community worse, and what it involved to bring parties together and figure out something that everybody could like. And I left because it wasn't satisfying to me. It wasn't the work I wanted to be doing with my life. And so at the beginning of 2010, I was about to turn 30 years old, and I went into the public service work that I've been doing ever since. And for me, it was a good learning experience. I think having that grounding and understanding of planning and documents is really helpful in this job. But I haven't been doing that work for about 11 years. I've been doing public service work, and that's the path that I've been on.
Okay. Okay. So Sam, just to clarify, in your legal career, you have never worked on a development project for a client at all? Is that correct? Did I understand you correctly?
In the land use context, no.
In the land use context, no. Okay. Okay. I'm going to now move over to infrastructure. And Mike, do you want to take over for infrastructure?
Sure. So the first thing I want to do is just go through some critical infrastructure and hear from each of you, sort of rapid fire, if you think it's adequate, inadequate, or threatened. So let's start with police response times. Katy, I'm going to go through you. I'm going to just go through the list with you first, and Sam, I'll do you. So Katy, police response times, adequate, inadequate, or threatened?
Inadequate.
Okay. Fire response times.
Inadequate. Oh, actually, well, it depends on the part of the city, but generally speaking, they're overburdened. So I'll say inadequate right now.
Let's keep this to CD5.
Which part of the city has actually good response times?
Well, I was looking at fire stat this morning, and it wasn't terrible in CD5. So.
Okay, we'll talk about that soon.
Okay.
Road surfaces. Inadequate.
Inadequate. Terrible.
Water availability.
Threatened, but available.
Power distribution.
Inadequate.
And sewage systems.
Inadequate.
Great. Okay, Sam, let's go through the same list. Police.
Horribly inadequate.
I don't think that was a choice. Fire response time.
Inadequate.
Road.
Inadequate.
Water.
I would say threatened.
Power.
Inadequate.
And sewage.
Inadequate.
Okay, so I have these answers from you. And what I want to take a second and do is just read from the current West LA community plan that says, if infrastructure resource capacities are threatened, particularly critical ones such as water and sewage, and there is not a clear commitment to at least begin necessary improvements in 12 months, then building control should be put into effect for all portions of the West LA community until land use designations for the community plan and corresponding zoning are revised to limit development. So my question is, and it ties to your answers about density bonuses, how can you encourage increases in density if you've both just answered that literally none of our infrastructure is adequate? Katy, you're first, and I have, is that 60 or 70 seconds, Marcia? Because you have a 70, but I have a total 140 for the answers.
Take it 60.
Okay. And Katy, you're first on that.
So I think we need to be doing two things at the same time. I think we need to be building the type of housing that we need in the places it should be, which is affordable and workforce housing near job centers and transportation that people living in that housing will actually use. And at the same time, we need to be going gangbusters after the federal and state infrastructure money that is flowing. And we have to know how to walk and chew gum at the same time. And I don't think we can put on hold indefinitely building the housing that we know we need while we build out the infrastructure, because infrastructure projects take years. We need to be doing both at the same time. And I know that this is a particularly important issue to you, Michael, and I share the concern. I mean, like I said, I'm an infrastructure geek. This is what I'm passionate about, but I don't think we can put on hold all the housing we know we need while we build out that infrastructure. We have to do both at the same time.
Sam?
Every project that gets built needs to be a win-win, and a council member has an incredible ability to be robustly involved in these projects, right? Nothing is purely ministerial. I think someone identified that in the chat as well. So whether there's some discretion or significant discretion, a council member could come in and make these projects better and enhance the amount of affordable workforce housing to improve the parking or the height, the setback requests, and make sure there are investments, whether it's from the developer or with, in tandem with with government as well, because we're at this point right now where if we're going to add thousands of people to our neighborhoods, right, which I think that's the direction that the state is requiring us to do, our city is going to be overburdened. We see it. Our streets are falling apart. Our sewer and grid fails us, and I'm not going to allow that thousands of people will come into neighborhoods because it's unsafe for them unless we deal with the infrastructure issue.
Okay.
So I'm not sure either of you really answered the question.
Thank you.
Right now, you've talked about doing both, Katie. You have to do two things at the same time. But right now, as it exists, fire response times are inadequate. A person up the street just waited 25 minutes for a rescue for a heart attack. We're operating in what's called degraded mode right now, where for those people in Comstock Hills and in my area, the rescues were shut down. So how do you throw more fuel onto the fire by adding more development without doing the infrastructure first, which is what the general plan and the community plan require? Let's go with Katie, or Sam rather, for 60 seconds.
Sure, and I would add to it that we're being upzoned with the new housing element, right? And some of it without any public comment or outreach. And we wake up one day and our homes are, our neighborhoods have been upzoned dramatically. And let's be specific, right? There is Fire Station 92 near us, and they're overburdened. There is no police station in CD5, right? They're overburdened. I've spoken a lot to our senior lead in our neighborhood, and that's why I support greater funding for fire and not defunding the police and expanding our police force to what it was under Mayor Villaraigosa. Those things are imperative. And in terms of the housing, if we focus on the commercial corridors where there is that capacity, we can create the right balance where
let me interrupt for a quick second, if I can. Sure. The question is, right now, there's a limited amount of infrastructure, limited amount of police coverage, limited amount of fire. Every time you build a new unit, you are further degrading public services, public safety. How do you, is it both of your arguments that it's okay to degrade public safety in the name of affordable housing until somehow it catches up, even though there's no money to do that? Sam, finish off your time for me.
Yeah, I don't think it's a responsible or safe thing to do. So that's why I'm talking about ways that we can improve at least our emergency services now. While these projects, some of them are getting built or trying to be entitled or tied up in litigation. And as a community plan, as a council member, I'm going to raise this issue as imperative, is that if we're upzoning, then we need to make sure that we are making significant, meaningful investments in infrastructure, sewage, streets, electrical, everything, water, and it's not being done right now. So I think the only part of the community plan update that people are talking about is being upzoned.
Okay, so what I'm not hearing, wait a second, Mike. What I'm not hearing is we're going to abide by the community plans. That's what I'm not hearing. And the problem is that when we don't do that, that leads to that's another flavor of corruption, because the community plans were put in place through probably what I would call some great effort with a lot of different types of constituency groups. And so what I'm hearing, I'm not hearing anybody say, you know what? We're going to abide by the community plan. And if we can't do the housing in CD5, then it's going to have to be someplace else. Comments?
Well,
Katy?
Katie needs
I
her
have my
time.
turn.
Katie, you need your time.
Yeah, so I've talked to police officers and firefighters in CD5, and most of what they're doing right now is direct or indirect response to our homelessness crisis. Our unhoused population is sucking a lot of the need and time from our first responders. You add on top of that COVID and people getting sick, and we have a crisis right now. And what we need to be doing is moving first responders out of homelessness response and getting them back to doing the work that they went into their jobs in the first place to do. They want to be out of homeless service provision. We need them out of it so they can not be 25 minutes late when someone has a heart attack. So, you know, to answer your question, Marcia, our community plans are outdated and they're not being followed now anyway. That's why all of you have all these fights that you keep having around development, because people aren't coming in and building to the community plans. They're coming in and asking for a variance and to double the density or something. So the community plans aren't being enforced at all anyway. And so I think that's why we need to do real robust community planning where we all come together, decide, and then they're enforced. But I don't believe that we can stop building the housing that we need. We just need to shift the duties away so that first responders are focused on what they've been hired to do.
Okay,
And
so
I'm wondering if we can have a minute bathroom break. If that's, I texted you, Marcia. I would really appreciate it.
can we finish up this section, Katie? I mean,
Sure.
that is, you know, okay, whatever.
No, but Marcia's point was dead on, and I'm not sure that we've heard an answer to it yet.
I agree.
The general plan framework is pretty close to what we're trying to talk about here. It requires, the city agreed as a mandatory mitigation to require infrastructure as a condition of increasing allowable density. So I think Marcia's question was, is it okay to ignore the community plan and the general plan framework to get more housing? Or you've mentioned that we need to do community plans and stick to them. So I guess Marcia's plan is, are you going to stick to them?
I'll answer the question. So as a council member, we have to follow the law. Community plans are the law. We'll follow them. What I've indicated is I think that in the short term, we can do a lot more to improve our infrastructure so that we can get to the place where we can build more housing. But when I'm sitting in that seat and a project is proposed and we look at the community plan, and I know Westwood community plan is going to be updated, and I look forward to the opportunity to work with you to come up with a better plan than what we have now because it's outdated. I will oppose projects that do not fit the community plan, and that's why I'm not taking money from real estate developers. I do not want to be have any conflict of interest or any questions of whether decisions are made on the merits or not. So I will abide by the law, yes, and every council member should be. And I think that's one of the reasons why our city has gone into this mess on every issue, whether it's Airbnb, oil and gas wells, TOC, street vending, going down the line. We're not following the law, and they will.
Even if that conflicts with building affordable housing, Sam, and then Katie, you get to go.
So obviously that will be litigated. That is being litigated now in terms of the applicability of SB 9 and 10. There is state mandates, right, Rena? And I think in every area there are conflicting laws and conflicting pressures. It is a imperative that we build more affordable workforce housing. And that's why it's imperative for us to update the community plan. And immediately in the short term, build up our infrastructure.
Katie, take a minute to just do a combined response.
So I feel like I've answered the question the way I want to answer it. I just want to say I'm not taking money from developers. I haven't been reached out to by developers to talk to me about projects. I represent the constituents of CD5, and my job is to make sure that you and your families and your communities are healthy and thriving, and that we have an opportunity to do proactive planning and policy making together. So I'll stop there.
Just one quick thing, Marcia, and then I think my section is up for. So you both talked about taking money from developers. Now, I probably stand alone from most people on the screen here. I don't care who you take money from as long as it's not somebody who has a project before the city, because I think that's a slippery slope. The real issue that I have is, are you going to stick to the general plan framework, and are you going to stick to the community plans? Or are you just going to rewrite them so that the restrictions aren't there? 30 seconds each, and then I'm done, Marcia.
Okay, so start with Katie.
So a lot of our community plans and specific plans haven't really been updated in decades. And so everyone has been operating under the assumption, the developers at least, that they're there and they can sort of be ignored. And then that starts a negotiation with the community, which is a really terrible way to do community planning. So I think we need, like I said, to update our plans and do it in a really, what?
Your timing.
Am I up? Sorry.
No, go ahead,
So, you know,
She's over?
He said 30 seconds.
You said 30 seconds.
all right, well, I'll stop.
Okay, so, well, Katie, what is your point? Put it in a nutshell.
I'll just leave it there.
Okay,
Sam.
So,
I'll reiterate, I will follow the law, right? And I want to avoid litigation. I want to avoid any questions of corruption and misuse of 245 or city council member discretion. As it is right now, I think there's a really difficult tension between the community plan, state mandates, and some of our needs. I think once we improve and update the community plan, and we, in the short term, invest the $1 billion surplus we have in emergency services infrastructure and hopefully more from the federal government, that tension hopefully will lessen, maybe go away. But I will follow the law. I'm not going to break the law for anyone.
okay, we have to stop.
You're up, Marcia.
Okay, thank you. If you want to take a 2-minute bathroom break, go ahead. But come right back because we're on a strict time schedule, okay?
Great. I'm going to go feed the cats.
Okay, you do that. I'm going to have some tea. Everybody else looks good. I've been looking. We have 14 questions in the chat box, and I'm excited to get to those. I haven't read them all, but I'm excited nonetheless. And everybody looks happy and good and well-fed, and I'm happy about that. And you all look beautiful to me. So, and thank you for being here, and thank you for everything that you do. Next week, don't forget, we have the Mayor's Forum. I've been in touch with the key candidates, Joe, Kevin, Karen, and Mike. They're all going to be here. Right now, it looks like it will be still in person with a small audience, or we may switch to Zoom, and we're going to watch the numbers as they go, and we'll see what happens. Don't forget, after this forum, you have to email me your preferences. And has everybody read the newsletter? Have you looked at the newsletter? Have you had an opportunity? Okay, good, because you'll see that there's certain questions that we asked during the interviews that we're not asking today. I also want to thank Diana Plotkin and Nikki Miner, who sat through with me 12 individual interviews, 2 hours each. And they both came a half an hour early. And so it's a lot of time invested by these volunteers. And that's what we are. We're all volunteers. So I want to thank Diana and Nikki for all of the help. I could not have put the newsletter together without them. I couldn't have done the interviews as well without them. And they've all been, they've both been super. So, hi. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Okay, I don't know if I can, wait a minute.
It was a pleasure, Marcia. Thank you very much for having us assist you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, it really was a nice experience. And to be able to meet the candidates, you know, up close and personal. Okay, Katie's back.
Oh,
Diana, you want to say something?
yes, I do. I think that everyone should know how much time and effort that you put into this and how much work that you had to do for all of us so that we could have this forum, that we can have the newsletter and we can participate. I think everyone owes you a tremendous gratitude. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. They are very kind. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
You're a fabulous leader. Thank you. So
They're all clapping. I can't hear it, but they're all clapping. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Diana, will you please remute yourself?
I don't know how.
You don't know how? Let me see.
Yeah, mute you. Can you mute me? Because I don't know how.
Yeah. I feel very powerful today. Okay, Diana's muted. Nikki, did you? Okay, you did it. Okay, so we're going to resume now. Katie, thank you for coming back. Not going out and getting a cup of coffee. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a topic that is very dear to all of us, and that is City Hall corruption. And it's a topic where, you know, when we have a project in our neighborhood, we can write letters, we can talk to the council member, we can participate in the planning forums and process, we can sue, we can appeal, we can do a lot of things. When it comes to City Hall corruption, we're the last to find out. I mean, unless somebody's got an inside track, which I personally do not have. We're the last people to find out until we read it in the newspapers or we see it on City Watch or the gossip is loud enough to reach the neighborhoods. So these questions are very critical because it's all up to you, the candidates and whoever becomes a council member. So my first question is, you will be joining a city council that many say is corrupt. How will this affect your work? You have up to 1 minute, and Katie, we'll start with you.
So I'm running and want to serve because I think that there's a lot of good that government can do. But you only get good stuff done on behalf of your communities if voters send ethical, effective, and proven people in. And I have a track record that makes clear that I know how to get big stuff done. I'm a problem solver and I'm a collaborator and I'm going to work with everybody. And I'm not at all interested in using this job for anything other than making Los Angeles a more vibrant, healthy, and livable place for all of us and our kids. And a lot of the ethical issues are around land use planning. And so we've been talking a lot about that. And I think we need to totally reform how we make decisions about land use. And I'm going to be as transparent as I can, explain why I'm making decisions that I'm making.
Stop. Okay, good. Sam?
Like many of you, lived in Los Angeles virtually my entire life, and watching the city decline has been such a source of heartache and sadness and recently anger, and realizing that a lot of it's due to the corruption that the people we've hired for this job, right? This is a job interview. This is why I'm sitting here before you. They've taken that job and used it to enrich themselves and their family members, and it made me angry. And that really would put me over the edge in terms of why I'm running. And that's why we ran a different type of campaign, not taking money from anyone who's not an individual, not taking money from people who have business before the city council, like developers and billboard companies and fossil fuel companies and others, and cannabis companies. And it's also it's the reason why our first white paper was on corruption. So we put out a 5-point plan on campaign finance reform ethics reform,
15.
planning reform, redistricting, and charter reform. I think we need more council districts. The redistricting process was, I think, could have been a sham. It got salvaged by good people like Rocky and all of your hard work. But there's things that can be done, and I look forward to accomplishing them.
Okay, so that's good because that leads into the next question. What will you personally do to stem corruption in City Hall, and how will you ensure that your staff does not have any ethics violations? Sam, you have
Yes.
60 seconds. Sam, you're first.
Sure. So obviously lead by example in our campaign. We try to be transparent. We've decided whom not to take money from, and we've stuck to it, and we've returned some money as well. And we've laid out this plan in terms of ethics reform needs to be a priority for our city. Right now, we have an ethics department that's understaffed, under budgeted, doesn't have subpoena power. That has to change. There has to be city attorney and a controller's office that are also empowered, that are independent from the council. Our ethics commissioners are appointed by the mayor and the city council. Talk about the foxes guarding the hen house. None of that makes sense. The only reason we caught the 3 council members who are facing federal prisons because they were tapped by the feds, right? It wasn't because the city processes worked. And there's a question in the chat about will you continue not taking money from developers when elected? Absolutely. All land use discussions will start at the community level.
15.
You will be you won't hear about a project down the line and no decisions will be cooked. You will be at the forefront. You will be shaping decisions, and I'll be sitting with you to make that happen.
Okay. What will you do when an audit completed? Oh, Katie, sorry.
Can you repeat the question again? It has to do with what am I going to do to be ethical?
What will you personally do to stem corruption in City Hall, and how will you ensure that your staff does not have any ethics violations? You have 1 minute.
So I think one of the most important jobs of a council member, besides leading by example, is who you hire and who you surround yourself with, and hiring only truly excellent people who have track records, not only on the substantive side, who know the issues really well, but who are also good, decent human beings who are public servants for the right reasons. And I know a lot of really wonderful public servants. I've worked with many great people, and it's not hard to know who the good apples are from the bad apples for me. Coming in, I have a leg up because I have relationships there, and I'm going to have a really excellent staff who's going to be able to hit the ground running, who knows what they're doing on day one, and it won't be tolerated. I mean, it just straight up won't be tolerated. I'm not going there to do anything other than make our community safer and healthier. And if you don't want to do that work, then you shouldn't be in my office.
Okay, good. Next question. What will you do when an audit completed by the city controller cites corruption, exploitation, or uneven treatment in how city services are delivered to various neighborhoods? You have up to a minute. Katie, you're first. So
this is a really interesting question because you didn't specify whether it was about within CD5 or outside of CD5. And, I think there are many jobs of a council member. One is to represent the interests of the stakeholders and constituents of CD5. And I think that's the primary job, delivery of excellent constituent services. But you're also one of 15 on the second largest city in the country. And so you also have an obligation to lead the city. And if there's evidence that we're not acting in ways that are bettering the lives of all Angelenos and we're sort of discriminating in terms of provision of service, then it's our responsibility to make sure that that ends. This city is a very
15
unequal city, and CD5 has the benefit of having a lot of the wealth, a lot of the trees and the parks, and we need to make sure that resources are being fairly divided amongst the city.
Stop. Thank you. Sam?
Yes. So, and I see a wonderful candidate for controller on, David Behetti. Hello. If David or our next controller issues an audit, first thing I do is read it. So audit after audit by Controller Galperin has been ignored by the city council. There is no audit committee of the city council. There is no evidence that any council member reads anything that Ron Galperin issues unless it gets on the front page of the LA Times. For example, 500 over 9,500 police officers who are sworn officers with guns on their belts are sitting in office dealing with subpoenas and paperwork and patrols. And Ron Galperin in 2014 said, let's move these folks to patrol. That didn't happen. Issue after issue, Prop Triple H, right? So I'm going to empower a city controller to do more than just issue audits. I will be a partner with him or her so that we are in a position that we have this independent watchdog who's rooting out the waste, fraud, and abuse. And if we find out that a project that entitlements were issued fraudulently, criminally, we should get those reversed and we should prosecute. And we need to make an example of people who are breaking the rules. And it is insane that's not happening right now.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, will you meet with lobbyists in City Hall or elsewhere? 15 seconds, that's a yes or no.
No.
Sam, you're first.
No.
Okay, Katie?
So lobbyists represent the interests of people. And sometimes it makes sense to meet with them. I will meet with all stakeholders. That doesn't mean I'm going to do what they want me to do, but my staff is welcome to meet with anybody who they think will provide a helpful perspective. But it's one thing to meet with different diverse interests, and it's another thing to do what they want you to do. Those are very different things.
Okay. If asked, will you publish your calendar on the controller's website? 15 seconds. Katie, you're first.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that. I don't see why not. I mean, as long as there's not any sort of personal stuff on there, but yeah, I think, you know, I think I'm a public servant and people have the right to sort of know what I'm doing as long as it's not a safety issue.
Okay.
You know, 3 little
Sam?
kids.
Yes, absolutely. They're all subject to the Public Records Act request anyhow. And rather than ask you to go through that process and fight you on it, if asked by the controller, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Next question. Will you publish your calendar for the forthcoming weeks in your newsletter to constituents? 15 seconds. Sam, you're first.
You know, the answer is I'd like to. The question is, I mean, logistically, every major meeting, every major event, absolutely. I also don't want to have to burden staff with constantly updating, but I think that's a great idea. I think that would be helpful for folks to know what I'm spending my time, or the next council member is spending his or her time on. That would be
Okay.
helpful.
And with whom? Katie?
Yeah, I've never thought about that, but I like that idea. You know, usually the council members or electeds have like a wrap up at the end of the week. But I like the idea of sort of forecasting what's coming and letting people know where I'm spending my time. Because my time is the most valuable commodity. And so if I'm not using it wisely, people should know what I'm doing with my time. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you. The issue is transparency. The issue is, what can we do to try and reduce corruption in the city? And one way to do that is through transparency. How effective it's going to be, who knows? If someone wants to commit, you know, or get an extra $100,000 in their pocket, I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do. But we want to see our government leaders take all the possible steps, every single one, to have transparency and reduce the possibility of corruption in our city government. And that leads me to the next question. Corruption comes in a lot of different flavors. Considering the budget crisis that the city is in, would you vote for furloughs for civilian city employees? That is 1 unpaid day off every 10 days, which would save the city $130 million, or would you vote for a voluntary buyout program for workers eligible for retirement, which would save the city $58 million? So a lot less. This sounds like a no-brainer to me, but council members were influenced by union leaders and supported the lesser solution, which ultimately netted the city because it was voluntary, the city gained only 2.6 million in savings. The question is, if you are elected to represent CD5 on city council, will you be swayed by these influencers, whether it's unions or lobbyists or whomever, to vote against the best interests of your constituents and the neighborhoods in the district? You have 15 seconds. And we start with Katy.
It's a lot there. The people who make our city work and who've been working their tails off for the last 2 years of COVID are heroes. And we should do everything we can to support them. We have a surplus right now of $1.2 billion. And so I don't support either of those things. I think we need to do what we can to keep our city running. And the last thing we need to be doing is furloughing people right now.
Okay, Sam?
We have a tension between balancing the budget and providing world-class city services, including fire and safety and police, right? And in normal times, we have a $200 million deficit pre-pandemic. We play games and we have to make decisions like this. Right now, we've been bailed out by the economy, by the federal government, and we don't have to make those decisions. I'm going to focus on getting us the best services possible.
Okay, so you would take the lesser option. Am I understanding what you said? Sam, you would take the lesser option?
It's a hypothetical that is not before us right now. And if it appears again, we'll have to weigh what it means, right? Which employees, right? I'm not going to furlough hundreds of police officers. And where are we in terms of our
with city employees?
Right.
Okay. Okay. As council member, how would you respond to the scandal with LAPD and the thefts from its gun store? You have 60 seconds. Sam, you're first.
Yeah, I think as much as many of us appreciate our police department, they're like any other city department, they need to be held accountable to break the rules. We're going to demand that the police chief and senior leadership explain what happened here and what they're doing to hold those accountable, make sure it never happens again. And if those answers are not satisfactory, the city council has it, and the mayor have ability to change how we approach the relationship with LAPD. So when I read that, I was furious, and it didn't matter which department, but the fact that it was LAPD making us less safe like that, it's not acceptable. And I don't think those people should continue to keep their jobs, obviously, at minimum.
Okay, but the question is, what would you do?
Right. So immediately demand response from LAPD, and if they're not satisfactory, we will make sure that we have an independent process here. There's still, whether it's civil service or the police review board or the police commission or through the mayor, we'll talk to every department possible and figure out how we can hold those accountable here.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Katy?
So I work with the mayor's office because the mayor oversees the departments, and demand that there's an audit of procedures and policies and make sure that there are adequate policies and procedures in place so that this never happens again. It's unacceptable.
Okay.
Marcia, if I can, just real fast.
Yep.
I just want to, what happened at the LAPD gun store was, of course, an outrage, but I want to make sure that we don't assume that any officers who were mentioned are guilty of doing something. I say this only because our own captain was involved or was mentioned in this issue, and no charges were filed. I just want to make sure that we're not assuming that every officer that was involved did something wrong.
Okay. If any of your fellow council members are accused of corruption, will you author a motion to sanction and remove that person from the council without pay and pension? Katy, you first. You have 30 seconds.
So you said accused of corruption.
Yes.
We have processes in place in a justice system, and unless there's overwhelming evidence that actually is accurate, it's not my job to be the judge and the jury. If there's a lot of evidence, like there was in the case of the most recent case, then I would support that, and perhaps I would co-author it. But It depends on the circumstances, what the evidence is, whether it's damning and overwhelming.
Okay. Sam?
It depends on the nature of the corruption and the public evidence available. So if it's a federal indictment, there will be that charge available. Whether it's England or Huizar or Mark Lee Thomas, there was overwhelming evidence, video, photographs, wiretapping, and the federal government, the feds put that all out there. So having read those three, I would have had no problem suspending without pay all three. But
15.
obviously not every charge will have that level of public evidence. If the act, for example, if it comes from the ethics department or the DA, we may not have that. And these three were especially terrible, so I would have.
Okay. You know, again, on corruption, if people know what the circumstances are going to be, if they do bad acts, I don't know that it acts as a deterrent, but they may think twice about how these bad acts will affect their families. And not, I mean, obviously they thought they could get away with something, but again, we in the coalition and in the neighborhoods want to do what we can and ensure we can do what we can and have people we can depend on to do what's necessary and what should be done. Okay, the next question has to do with something that was touched on before, and I want to circle back to it. What will you do if the council president refuses to schedule a council file to be heard by city council, as has happened with council file 21-1414? You have a minute to say what you will do. Sam, you're
Yes.
first.
21-14-14 is especially an important example, right? Because it's important to all of us on SB 9.
Yes.
It was mandated. It's what the cities had as our tool to protect ourselves from the adverse consequences of SB 9. I know Council President Martinez has promised to bring that up to a vote. Disappointing that didn't happen. I would work with my colleagues to create that pressure. I'm endorsed by two candidates on the city, two current city council members. The only two have endorsed so far, Joe Buscaino and Curran Price. If they were my colleagues at the time, I would talk to them and say, look, we should really bring this up and make this a priority for us. If it's something as life and death as I think this is really for neighborhoods, the future of our neighborhoods, you know, we have other tools, right? Engaging the neighborhoods in a public campaign, the press. Ultimately, the council president has that authority, and but I will try to use a public pressure campaign as a last resort. But I do think that it's imperative that we, as a council, work together.
Okay, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a place where me having experience in government is really helpful. There's a lot you can do behind the scenes with your colleagues to put pressure where pressure needs to be exerted. There's a lot you can do with organizing community support. And so I would deploy all the tools at my disposal to bring to a vote any council file that I thought needed to be heard. You just use the tools that you have available and you do it skillfully. And you do it in a way that preserves relationships, because the next week you're going to have to work with the council president again. I mean, you have to have those relationships, and you need to do it in a respectful way, but you need to be strong.
Okay. This next question has to do with lobbyists. And of course, I do not want to give all lobbyists a bad name, but frankly, I think it's too late for that. So here's the question. Will you identify to the coalition those lobbyists who try to influence you and other council members in favor of developments that HOAs and CD5 oppose? Will you go as far as condemning these lobbyists and publishing their names and firms and the projects they are promoting? You have 45 seconds. And Katie, you're first.
So the question is, you did ask a question earlier about sort of publishing my calendar. And so I think that's one way of finding out who me and my office is meeting with. I don't think lobbyists need to be condemned. Lobbyists represent interests, and they're not the public interest, they're their client's interest. And so, you know, it's not illegal to be a lobbyist. I don't think they're all inherently bad. They're just not representing the interests of the public, and knowing the difference between the two is really important. So,
15.
like I said, I'm happy to publish my calendar so people know who I'm meeting with. Most of it won't be with lobbyists, but yeah.
So the second part of that is, will you go as far as publishing their names and firms and the projects they are promoting? Would you do that, Katie?
Just putting down in CD5 the names of the lobbyists who are representing proposed projects in CD5?
Yes.
Sure. I don't see
Okay.
why not, if that's helpful information for people to have.
Sam?
The issue here is transparency. I would have no problem being as transparent as humanly possible. So if someone on behalf of a project reaches out to me, first of all, that's public information through Public Records Act anyhow. So I'm happy to disclose. And I think it should be part of the public universe of knowing that who's advocating for what project, how, right? So ultimately, if the community feels good that the process was fair and transparent. And I don't think condemning is the right word here. I think if they're, lobbyists have the ability and the right to do this, not illegal, right? And they have to disclose who their clients are and whom they're lobbying for, who they're raising money for. And lobbyists have reached out to me as a candidate over the last 15 months, and I've said, I'm not going to meet with you. Certainly not about our project. But I will have no problem publicly disclosing who's reached out to me about a project.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to now turn it over on public safety to Mike. And you're up.
So Marsha, I have just two quick follow-ups on the transparency potential corruption issue. So what will both of you do if a staff member decides to run for office? At what point should they no longer be on your staff? Sam, 15 seconds, and then Katie.
I don't think it's appropriate for an existing staff member in an office to run for office. I think there's a conflict of interest, and I also think that it's a diminution of the quality of services. I want someone who's going to be fully all in the job before him or her in my office, and running for office I know is at the 24/7 position. So you can't do both. And I think there's a real risk of whether there's an actual conflict of interest for the lawyers out there, whether it's actual or perceived, but their perception is bad enough. And I would ask that employee of mine to leave the office.
Katie?
Okay.
So as someone who's worked in government, and there's been some overlap with me running, I went part-time and limited my campaign time to the time when I wasn't working for Supervisor Kuehl. And I think it's important that what the person's running for, if it's the same role, then there's a lot more conflict. If you're working at the county and you're running at the city, that's different. And you have to very carefully track all your time and make sure you're not doing any campaign related stuff while you're on your job. But you'd put safety measures in place to make sure that that there was no impropriety.
Okay.
Okay.
Public safety.
Same question, except what about current electeds who are running for a different city office? Being a current elected is a full-time job. I think Sam, actually, I think you both said that. So tell me what your position is on that, starting with Katie.
How much time, Mike?
15 seconds, quickie.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see elected officials running for something else, not focused full time on the job that they were hired to do, and that's a problem. I don't know what we do about it, except publish their calendars and see what they're spending their time during the day doing. You know, you're not going to.
Thanks, Katie. Sorry, Sam.
We've seen really bad results in a failure of good policy at a time we need them most. I think it's a third of the city council is running for something else right now, and I think that's unfortunate. There's nothing we do to outlaw it other than as us voters saying, do your job and do that well, and then you can possibly get a promotion. But
Okay,
But-
thank you. That's-
But I
stop.
think, I'm going to move into the public safety in a second, Marcia, but I think the issue is if you're holding a position, a public service position where you do influence, whether it's county or it's city, it creates, it creates a conflict. People are going to be more likely to give you money because they want something in the present. And so I think that's where I was going. Public safety. So we've talked a little bit about this, but are each of you aware of how response times for fire is calculated generically? Do you know what the times are for a fire department to get to you after you've placed your call?
Mike, is that a question?
Katy? It's just a quick yes, no. Katie?
Do I understand how response time is calculated?
Yeah, what do
The
you mean?
time when the call is placed and dispatched to the station, the time before service is provided, where they get where they're going.
Right. Okay. Sam, just real fast, do you understand how it's?
That's my understanding. I've generally focused on the numbers and how it's gone up and down over the years, but I'd love to learn more, Mike, if you have
Okay,
specific
so
details. Yeah.
just for everybody, there's a standard that for fire, they need to be there within, from the moment dispatch is over, within 5 minutes and 20 seconds. And for EMS within 5 minutes. And that's a minute for turnout, getting to the engine or the rig, and then travel time makes up the rest. The question is, looking at FireStat, which I did right after I fed the cats, we're nowhere in the city is our response times where they need to be. How will you improve that? And primarily, I'll tell you, the firefighters are turning out in time. We're talking about travel time that's killing them. So tell me, how do you fix this, this critical problem? Let's start with Sam, and let's go with a minute each.
Right. So obviously, I think we need to make sure that the fire department has the funding it needs, and the trucks and the officer, the firefighters there, and the EMS staff. Traffic is back to being soul crushing again. I think part of it is also the degradation of our streets, the potholes and the problems we see there. I think are part of the issues here too. But I think we need to have better planning in terms of how we get people from whether it's 71 or 92 or the stations all around CD5 to the places they need to go faster. And I think there's some ideas there in terms of better technology as well, but a lot of it's resources and better planning.
Katie?
Yeah, so I think we need to make sure LAFD is fully funded and has what it needs, and they're going to have a partner in me. I think we need to make sure that they're focused on emergency response and shift their duties away whenever possible from homelessness response and figuring out what pieces of what they're doing right now in connection with responding to our unhoused crisis can be shifted elsewhere. And I think we need better data and better tracking, and to make sure all our infrastructure is up to snuff so that we can get where we need to go as quickly as possible.
Okay. Let's do the next question I'll ask is, do you think that there's been a lot of news about firefighter salaries and overtime? Do you see overtime as the problem or the symptom? Sam, you're up.
I think for fire and police, it's a symptom, right? The fact that Paul Kretz had to pay $100,000 to get the patrol we need to Melrose to save lives. The homicides in the Wilshire Division went up from 1 to 13 from 2019 to 2021. The fact that Paul Kretz, I think, saved some lives with that overtime is helpful, but that's a Band-Aid, right? So that's not going to solve the solution. And same thing with fire is that they've been asked to do so much: homelessness, COVID, and there's not enough of them. A lot of them have been working really long, hard hours, and obviously getting overtime is the way we thank them, and that's why their compensation has gone up. We need more and really well-resourced, well-trained, fully funded firefighters throughout CD5.
Okay.
Can I answer that question too?
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I got distracted reading the next question.
So I agree it's a symptom. Firefighters shouldn't be working double, triple shifts. It doesn't make for safer communities. Same goes for police. We need to have well-staffed emergency response departments. And it shouldn't fall to the councilman's office to use his discretionary money. And it's wildly inappropriate that has to be done. And I'll fight like hell to make sure CD5 is getting the resources we need so that I'm not having to use my discretionary money that Katy should be using on the community, on making sure we're healthy and safe, making sure that we have enough police officers and firefighters. It's not a sustainable system right now. And you know, we should shift the duties, like I've said before, away from homelessness response and back to the work that they were hired to do in the first place.
Okay, next question. The hillsides are particularly vulnerable to bad response times. Even though it's not in CD5, Station 19 is a massive first in area. But looking at in CD5, how do you look at development on very narrow streets in the hillside areas, given the response times into hillside areas? Let's go with Katy first.
So I'm a supporter of limiting development in our hillsides.
Much time?
For fire safety.
I'm sorry, let's go 60 seconds, Marcia, sorry.
So you sort of nailed it. We should be preserving our hillsides and open space as much as possible. They are the gems of Los Angeles, and it's why so many of us live here. And we need that respite. And when you overdevelop in the mountains, it's not safe for the people who live there, who need to maybe get out in an emergency. If it's jammed with cars, you can't get, like you said, emergency service providers up. And so really being strategic about how having a different set of land use policies up in our hillsides from what we have down in the flats is really important, because there's a lot of different concerns up there that we don't have down in the flats. And so being really responsive to the needs of people who live up there and making sure we keep them safe is critically important, avoiding overdevelopment.
Okay, thank you, Katy.
Wait, Mike, I just want to jump in here. Of course,
Please.
When it comes to the hillsides, the issue is always development also. There are many substandard streets up in the hillsides. So I'll just make the comment that development has to be parsed very carefully, and projects have to be parsed very carefully in the hillsides in order to ensure that not just after the construction is finished, that there are fire service vehicles and public safety can be executed. During construction, it has to do with the dumpsters that are out on the street. It has to do with the trash that is put next to the dumpsters. It's about the baby cats that are up there or the full cats. I mean, there's lots of issues regarding development and public safety for the hillsides. So I encourage both of you candidates to kind of solidify that, because everything stems from bad development. Oh, sorry to interrupt, Mike.
Mike,
You're
can I
the
go?
boss. You get to do that. Sam, go ahead.
Sure. So it's imperative that we substantially restrict new development, more development in the hillsides, right? Obviously, SB 9 creates some opportunities for new development there, which we have to instill these new protections at the city level, given the risks there. I support the Ridgeline ordinance. That's a valuable tool. I know it's kind of stuck in planning right now, but we have to move that forward to make sure that both protecting both the pristine undeveloped, but also having some smart regulations for existing development as well. That's why I oppose the Benedict Canyon Hotel. That's why I oppose the Berggruen Institute. I don't think specific plans should be used to rezone and upzone and build massive projects in the hillside. Santa Monica Mountains are a gem. They're a resource. We should not be. That's not where we need housing. Right? We know where housing should go. It's on their commercial corridors and not on the hillsides.
He's done.
So let's do a sort of semi follow-up here. So Station 92 has fewer firefighters now than it did in 1974. And we've had a little bit of development in Century City, maybe, maybe 20, 30 million square feet. I think you both just referenced that there shouldn't be development in the hillsides until it is safe. Why isn't that also true for people in the flats? If public safety is not available and is inadequate, why wouldn't you have those same that same criteria for development? Sam, you're up first. 30 seconds.
Yeah, it goes back to that earlier question, right? There's that really difficult tension between community plan and infrastructure, emergency services, and we need more workforce affordable housing badly. So we can, we've talked about this, we need more resources to firefighters. We have to bring the staffing levels at 92, I think at 71 as well, higher up, while we update our community plan. And again, I will enforce the community plan rules and regulations. That will be my job as a council member.
Okay, Katie?
So we need housing, and we need it to go in the best places possible. And we need to make sure people are safe in our communities. And as Sam mentioned, there's a tension there, right? But it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. And the way we make sure we have the resources for our emergency responders is by making sure there's enough money. And the city's budget has been underfunded for decades. And so the council needs to be thinking strategically about how we're going to increase those resources so that we can have world-class services again. And it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game.
15.
And my job is to find the money and do it in a way that is fair and gets us where we need to be, because LA is not that city right now. And we need creative people who are willing to figure out how we're going to bring the money here.
I think my point was, and this is just a little comment, that there was a willingness to restrict hillside development because it was unsafe, but I'm not seeing the same commitment for those of us who don't live in the hillsides, even though I live on a hill. It's a small hill, but it is a hill. Let me do two more questions, Marcia. They're the last two on your list.
Okay, let's speed it up.
Okay, how will you work to stem the tide of robberies and assaults in CD5, 60 seconds each? And that one, I think, Marcia, you've listed it as Sam goes first.
Did you say the smash and grabs? Or what type of?
It's the tide of robberies and assaults,
okay.
but you can address smash and grab.
Okay, sure. So first of all, we have to be honest and serious that crime is going up, and it's not just because it's a national trend, but there's things that are happening locally. The explosion of guns on our streets, not enough police officers patrolling, consequences being reduced, and it's led to lawlessness. Criminals have realized they can get away with more, and people feel unsafe. And that's our primary job as council members, is to keep people safe. So I will continue Paul Kretz's Band-Aid approach, which is, God bless him for doing it, but allocating discretionary funding to get police officers to areas that are where we need them, where the crime is up. We have to increase police funding generally. Right now, 9,500 police officers, 9,400 is not enough with crime going up. We're down from 10,000, and we got to get the 500 people that are behind a desk per Ron Galperin out on the streets. We got to get mental health, 5150 hold, noise complaints, traffic stops, all these things that aren't core police work out of their responsibilities. Guns and gangs. That's the job of police officers. They signed up to do. That's what they're willing to do. Run the line of fire for our kids. And then we got to have better coordination with neighborhoods. We need better technology, cameras, and license plate readers wherever we can.
Okay.
Go, Katie.
So look, we all deserve to be safe in our communities. It means safe homes, safe streets, safe businesses. And we need to be thinking about public safety, both long-term and short-term. So in the short term, which we've already talked about, we need a fully staffed, well-trained, reformed police department. And at full staffing capacity, officers can be out day in and day out, walking or driving the same beat, developing deep relationships with the community. Being present and visible in the community is a really important thing. And being able to nimbly respond to spikes in crime through task forces, additional folks on the street, through strategic deployments, that's important. LAPD is doing this in the context of smash and grabs and along Melrose. And with a well-staffed force, with officers doing the work they went to the academy to do, solving crime, preventing crime, we can make some headway. We also need to be investing in communities, providing pipelines into good paying jobs. Public education needs to be done better, job training, pathways out of poverty, providing high quality preschool and childcare, making it easier for people to thrive in Los Angeles. And the criminal justice system itself needs to be reformed, and we should be focused on rehabilitation and opportunity and giving people pathways.
Okay, not a question. Just to point out, those smash and grab, the 14 who were arrested were out the same day. So we have a little bit of a motivation problem with the police who work hard, put themselves at risk, and then the people are released same day. But I'll move on. So next, what will you do to ensure that oil wells and rigs in CD5 are inspected and maybe decommissioned? Katie, I
30
think you're first.
seconds, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Katie, you're up.
Yeah, so this is something that I'm passionate about and I've had a chance to work on at the county. And right as I was leaving, the board voted to phase out new oil and gas drilling at the county and to do better inspections. And this is in unincorporated LA County, which is the only place the county has land use jurisdiction. And so for me, regular inspections so that we can establish patterns of abuse of behavior, followed by a plan to start to shut these down responsibly and safely is going to be a priority for me, because we're not healthy and safe right now in our communities with active oil wells all around us.
Okay.
Sam, hit it.
Yeah, the city, county, state are all failing us here, right? They promising us inspections or phasing this out for years, and it's not been happening. There's been an oil spill in December of this past year on Pico and Doheny, where there's 57 wells. I've been a leader on the issue with the Pico Coalition, and I've been quoted in the LA Times 5 years ago on this issue. We've been promised an ordinance. There's been no ordinance, no inspections happening. We need 24/7 monitoring, annual inspections, and we have to stop waiving CEQA for oil and gas wells, which we're doing over and over again. Our neighborhoods are suffering. We have the worst air quality in the entire country. So despite all the promises we've been made by that, folks, it's not happening.
Stop.
You're up. I'm done, Marcia.
Okay, we're now going to go into a lightning round about constituent services. So these are going to be short answers. Just bullet them out. 1, 2, 3. The Westwood Park Advisory Board has 2 members that don't live in Westwood, and openings for 2 more members that the park director won't fill. What will you do about this? 30 seconds. Sam, you're up.
I think it's imperative that the people who serve on these local boards, whether it's design or park or otherwise, are from the neighborhood, know the environment.
What will you do?
I will make sure those spots get filled by people from Westwood by calling and demanding to the head of the department that we fill these, right? Parks and Recs has not been responsive, and that needs to end right now.
Okay, Katie?
I'll call up the director and tell him or her that the seats should be filled by people who live in the community that use the park. And the 2 people who don't live in the neighborhood should be replaced.
And what if this person is a civil service person and says, you know, I'll be here long after you're here? What are you going to do?
Pretty sure that's not how it works. But I'll call the mayor's office, because the mayor oversees the departments, and I'll make sure I have a good relationship with whoever the next mayor is. And I'll ask them to call up the department head. Okay.
Hey, Marcia?
Yeah.
Because I happen to be on that advisory board, and I'm pretty sure this question was directed at me personally. I live just outside of, no, Marcia, it's important. When you guys are talking about picking people, are you talking about people who are in the catchment area for the park, or are you talking about people who live within a certain radius?
I can go first. I think stakeholders, people who use the park, people who have a history with the park, who know it, and I'll figure that out by sitting with you and asking you the questions. And I use the park. I know it well, whether it's Aiden's place or the rec center or the grass field.
Yeah, people who use the park, who live near the park, who are part of that community should have a say and voice in what happens there.
Okay. How will you improve the lives of the elderly who live in the district? Just bullet it out. 30 seconds. Katie, you're up.
So for seniors, there are some specific issues. One is around transportation, making sure that microbuses are available and running and accessible is really important. A lot of the older folks I've talked to are concerned about public safety right now. And so and that includes things like sidewalks and having well-maintained sidewalks so people aren't tripping. It means streetlights, and it means making sure our communities are safe. So I would say those two things.
Okay, Sam?
First, housing, because there many folks who are seniors are facing potential eviction at the moratorium, and I've worked with VetSec to protect low-income seniors. Public safety, and not just crime. We're all worried about crime, especially seniors on the streets, but also disaster emergency relief. They're the ones who may possibly face the biggest risk if we have not if, but when we have an emergency or natural disaster here, we have to make sure there's a plan in place that is ready to be implemented to protect our senior population. And transportation is a critical one too. I know folks, it's difficult to get around, and we have to come up with better solutions like microtransit.
Stop. Okay. And I would offer, because I want to put it out there, that to help the elderly, you should have grocery stores. You must bring grocery stores to the area so they don't have to go 5 miles because they don't drive necessarily, or maybe some of them shouldn't be driving. You need to level the sidewalks and repair the sidewalks. You need to keep scooters off the sidewalks, and there are many other things. And I would offer that if one of you is elected, that you pull together an advisory committee to handle this issue, because it also ties to other kinds of things like mobile mental health units and how to serve people who need medical care but can't get to a location, like getting a COVID shot or something like that. So you need to do an advisory to help the elderly. They're a forgotten constituency frequently in the district. Okay, so this is a 15-second question. Will you secure from UCLA or Cedars some mobile mental health units for CD5 to serve those with mental health illness and addictions? You have 15 seconds. That's yes or no. Sam, you're first.
Absolutely. I've spoken to UCLA and Cedars about a host of issues already. I think this is a natural win-win for them. This is a population that they should be serving. And frankly, they're picking up the slack where the county is failing us on mental health, on homelessness, and the pandemic and mental health. So yes.
Stop. Katie?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. We have a real assets in UCLA and Cedars, and I think they're willing and interested in coming to the table as true partners. And I don't know why they wouldn't want to do this.
Okay. Next, what steps will you take to improve urban forestry? 30 seconds, Katie.
So our urban forest is one of the most important ways we can make our communities more livable and healthy. And it sounds sort of cheesy to say, but a healthy tree canopy can help reduce ambient temperatures by up to 10 degrees in our neighborhoods. And so for me, this is a really important part of community livability. And I've had lots of conversations with people who are on the tree task force at the city, and this is work that I've been doing at the county level, and I'm excited to make our communities greener and healthier.
Okay, Sam?
Adding trees is a great use of our dollars. I would prioritize that use. Second, we need more parks and pocket parks and expanding our trees. A lot of our trees are dying, and we got to do a better job of replacing them. And then finally, as development and infrastructure projects get built, we need to prioritize what it means for what it's going to do for the environment. We can make these really big environmental wins. So I would make sure trees are a priority as part of every project and every infrastructure upgrade.
Okay, thank you. This is the last question. Will you be willing to send me a document that outlines the 3 big policy differences between Sam, you with Katie, Katie, you with Sam? And will you be willing to send me a document in writing with your goals, with metrics if possible, for your first week, your first 6 months, and your first year and first term? Would you be willing to do that? Yes or no? Katie, you're first.
Sure.
Okay. Sam?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll be in touch. And as the coalition knows, that's my strong suit. So, okay, we have 28 questions in the chat box. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to them all, but I will try to get to that, some of them. I don't know how to get all the questions in the chat box.
You can scroll.
I have to scroll. Okay.
It'll take long.
I can't.
You want me to try one, Marcia?
Yeah, I don't know how to do this.
Okay, so there's a scroll bar on the far right that lets you scroll up and down.
Yeah.
Right there.
But one of them happens to
Oh,
be.
I see it. Okay,
You wanna
got it.
do it? You
I'm
got it?
getting there. I'm getting, no, that only goes for the names.
Here.
No,
But
you can
doesn't
expand
move.
it with the little down
Oh,
arrow
okay.
in the upper left corner.
Okay,
Can
okay.
I ask one, Marcia?
I'm trying to see them.
Okay,
all.
well, can I ask one while you're looking?
How it can increasing public transportation help alleviate parking and traffic problems when public transportation is not safe and anybody is not safe and anyone who can do otherwise will not use it, making it safe is virtually impossible. I don't know if there's a question in there, but that's a comment. Parking is paramount for business. Many have grandfathered reduced parking and cannot expand or cannot use for fear of triggering new parking requirements, creating more bike lanes and converting the popular temporary outdoor dining areas that were created during LA al fresco to a permanent condition may impact available street parking. What ideas, thank goodness, a question. What ideas do you have for small businesses to have affordable, convenient parking for their customers who are coming to them in cars? You can have 30 seconds. We'll start with Sam on that.
Sure. I think
Sam?
we've talked about some of this, right? Is that some shared use agreements, and in Westwood Village, for example, we're already discussing about a universal parking program, or unlocking some of the parking that the office buildings don't use at night. Al fresco creates that tension. I think a lot of people really like sitting outdoors, but it's costing us parking and costing us lanes. And I do think, though, as we upgrade our community, we have to figure out where we can build more parking. And I think that's something that we really need to do.
Okay, Katie?
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit, and I think thinking about parking sort of on a street level, a block level, and doing planning and understanding what you already have, and then figuring out how businesses can share and use it strategically, because some businesses are open during the day, right? And some businesses like restaurants are really open at night. And so you can have these shared neighborhood level or even street level use agreements. And the job of a council member can be to facilitate those conversations and figure out how we can all work together to make sure everyone has the parking they need.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one, Marcia? Can I pick
No,
one?
just a second. Let me get to TOC. TOC projects request additional discretionary incentives for height. They are not by right. Will you oppose the granting of discretionary incentives and enforce the labor standard? That's a 5-second question. Yes or no? Will you oppose the granting of discretionary incentives and enforce the labor standards? Katie, you're first.
I'll absolutely enforce labor standards. And I think the community needs to decide whether they want additional density. In some places it might make sense, in a lot of places it doesn't.
Sam?
I will oppose TOC and enforce labor standards until we get to a place that project is a win-win and it's a good one for the community.
Okay, next. You got 15 seconds. What is your plan to protect the environment in the Santa Monica Mountains? Sam, you're first.
Sure,
15.
I think the Ridgeline ordinance and the wildlife ordinance are great places to start. They're both stuck in planning right now. I support both. I think it's imperative that we protect that pristine mountains as a resource, and also wildfire, right, is a huge issue. We've talked about it a little bit from a firefighter perspective too, but we need more technology and better investment to make sure there aren't fires there.
Katie?
So at one point I worked at the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy on behalf of protecting and expanding our open space. And this is a passion of mine, and it's part of what makes LA special, right? And so we need to be using all the tools we have available, the Ridgeline Ordinance, opposing big construction like the Benedict Canyon Hotel.
Okay, here's a comment. We have never been able to use Roscoe School Playground on the weekends. We are in the hills without a place for the kids to play. Okay, that's a comment. What would candidates do to work on medical solutions to homeless? This question doesn't make sense. What would candidates do to work on medical solution to homeless issue with HHH type funds? Okay, Katie, you're first, I think. I've sort of lost track.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly answer this.
About 30 seconds.
HHH is to build housing, and H, the county's funding measure, is really about services and service provision. And so that's why you really need close collaboration between the county and the city, because there's these two pots of money, two different bureaucracies, they have to be working together. So really H is about that mental health service provision and medical solutions. And really part of why I'm interested in creating a City of LA Public Health Department is because it's too hard to have that coordination in terms of provision of care for the second largest city in our country.
Okay, Sam?
We need mental health psych beds. We have virtually none in CD5 that are provided by the county. So what's happening is people are falling into ER or jail because of their mental health breakdowns, or worse, 5 people dying every day on the streets. So it's a massive failure by the county. And if they're not going to do it, the city needs to take charge to find those beds and work with UCA and Cedars to make those a reality.
Okay, here's a comment. I have never seen a win-win for the Miracle Mile neighborhood. We always lose. Okay, next. Okay, this next question is about SB9, but we talked about SB9, and okay, we have your answers on record. What will you do to ensure that the community planning process is a fair one and not driven by the planning department and the mayor's agenda? There is a much larger issue right now. The community plans are being used to meet the goals of the housing element that states that housing is to go where the jobs are, and that housing should not displace residents in many defined communities. We have invested years working on the West LA Community Plan. This must be from Barbara Brody. Because the state gives cities 3 years to submit their rezoning maps to the state. Defending community plans that do not reflect the input of the community will lead to devastation. Here's the question. What happens when the community plan isn't representative of the community and its input? Sam, I think you're first.
Sure, and that's the job of
30 seconds.
That's the job of the council member to make sure that it is representative, and I don't think it is right now, and to make sure that we fight for it. I think a lot of us woke up and realized our neighborhoods were upzoned as part of the newest housing element. They rushed that process through an extraordinary speed. Nothing happens quickly in Los Angeles, apparently, other than upzoning. So this is something that we'll use at all the tools, and perhaps Mike and his folks at Fix the City have ideas as well. But
okay, time. Katie?
So stakeholder process is something that I have a lot of experience with. And I led the development of Measure W, which brought together a bunch, it's like herding cats for 3 years, business community, labor, 85 of our 88 cities, community health organizations, community groups. So I know how to do this in a way. My job is to create a space for community to come together. The job of a council member is to make that space and to create a fair process where everyone is heard,
15.
A process that's iterative, that's respectful and open, where no one constituency or party has too loud of a voice.
Okay.
And that's something that I know how to do and I'm excited to do here.
Okay. In Westwood, Parks and Rec continues to act independent of the wishes of the community by first getting money allocated before the community is able to have input. What will you do to require Parks and Recs to be required to meet with the community first and not voice their agenda on the community? 30 seconds, Katie.
Yeah, so this gets back to my last answer. You know, a council member can create spaces for conversations to happen and insist that those conversations happen and bring the necessary parties to the table. And so creating that space, asking and requiring the Parks Department to come to the table, making sure that the community is involved and that those conversations are happening, I think is a really important first step. And then making sure that there's follow through.
15.
You know, whatever it is that's agreed upon needs to then be executed. So much of government is that you have a great idea and then it's lost in the execution. And so follow through is really important.
Okay, it's 12:30.
Sam.
Oh, Sam, sorry. Okay, 30
Yeah,
seconds.
A lot of what we're seeing from our council members is promises or excuses, right? New ordinances will be drafted but not implemented. Ordinances will be promised but never drafted. And council members aren't exerting the power that they have by charter, soft and hard power to influence Parks and Recs in every department, frankly. And on day one, I'll make sure that parks are going to be incredibly important to me because it's important to you as leaders and stakeholders in our community, including Westwood. And we have to do a better job to get the right people in these advisory boards, empower those folks. So,
Okay, thank you. It's 12:31 and you know I like to end on time. We still have a lot of questions in the chat box and we can either continue or I would ask the candidates if you would be willing to come back for a second round of torture. So it's up to you. Candidates, if
I'm happy
are
to
you
stick around
willing
for a
to
few
come
more minutes.
back? If you're willing to come back, raise your hand.
I'd rather
Raise your-
continue a few more minutes right now if Katie can.
Yeah, I
No
can
more-
stay
No
for
more
like
torture,
5
huh,
more
Sam?
minutes. My
Sorry, no, I
husband,
wanted to continue now.
I
Yeah.
know.
Oh, okay.
yeah, we
Okay.
can do a couple more questions, but my husband is outside with the 3 kids and I just got a text. So
My
If
my
you're
wife
okay
too. We
with
got
this
childcare
crashing
also.
party,
Yeah.
then-
Marcia, can I suggest that we reconvene later, just because
Yeah.
I mean, there's a million questions. I think we should.
Right.
reconvene.
I mean, we still have a lot of issues. You know, I personally believe that of all the elected offices in the city, council member is the most important. So would you be willing, I think the consensus is, would you be willing to come back at another date and time in a couple of months, not tomorrow, to reconvene and revisit some issues and have these other issues posed to you? Would you be willing to do that, Sam?
Absolutely. That's my
Katie?
job. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. So first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for that. To the coalition, our next task is voting based on preference from this group. I'm going to ask Katie and Sam to sign off. Can you do that, please?
Yes.
Well, in terms of
Hi,
the-
everyone.
They were pretty equal.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch.
Hey, Marcia,
Yes.
I think that we should probably not
Wait
vote.
1 second. Let them sign off, Mike.
Bye,
That's cool.
bye, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer, I'm always one for secret ballot, so I think that people should send you their vote as opposed to making everybody in public indicate how they're gonna
No,
vote.
they're supposed to send it to my email.
Right, that's cool.
Right, you send it to marcia.sells@gmail.com. And you just give me a name of the person that you think you would prefer to see at this point in time, given what you know from the newsletter, what you know from the forum, what you know from other experiences, whatever, the person that you think would be the best choice for us to serve as our CD5 council member. Send it to my email and we'll move from there. And thank you. I see they're coming in now. Great. Okay, I love polling that people actually do. So that's great. If any of you have any issues, please, you can email me. If you have any questions about the newsletter or how this was run or whatever, as I said earlier, it wasn't optimal being not in person for everybody to be in the real audience. But whatever you have any questions or issues or comments, you're welcome to send them to me. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting unless anybody has anything else they want to say.
It's great to see all of you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you again and again, Marcia. You just do a wonderful job in this very unique and necessary coalition. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, very good. Thank you. I see clapping. Okay, very fine. Thank you, Allison. Okay. Okay, so I wish everybody a happy and healthy new year, and we'll be in touch next week. Mayor, also pretty important. And just take care. I'm going to end the meeting. Send me your votes. Anything else? Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you all for coming to my party.
Bye.
The refreshments weren't so good this week, but okay.
But all right, but the cookies are
Okay.
delicious in our minds.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.